I'm Rob Skinner, and this is the Rob Skinner Podcast. Today on episode 112, I'm going to talk to Dave Mitchell. Dave is a devoted husband, father of three, Christian, and a certified high-performance professional coach. He spent the last 20-plus years studying personal growth and leadership development. His mission is to coach disciples and help them break through whatever it is that's keeping them from experiencing the life that God intends for them. You'll learn 4 things that block you from becoming the person you want to be, the 3 E's of coaching that help people grow, and the power of getting 1% better. All this and more on the Rob Skinner Podcast. Welcome back to the Rob Skinner Podcast. My goal is to inspire you to live a no-regrets life, to make this life count, and multiply disciples, leaders, and churches. I want to invite you to the 2021 Small Church Leadership Conference. The theme is Climb. This is for anyone who wants to grow, who's leading a small ministry or small church, and who desires to get inspired and get encouraged coming out of COVID. This is the second conference that we've had. The first one we entitled Look Up, but this one is called Climb. It's December 2nd through 5th, 2021, December 2nd through 5th of this year in Dallas, Texas. We're staying at the Marriott Las Colinas. We've arranged hotel prices of $109 per night. Early registration is $125 until June 30th. Then it goes up to $150 until August 31st. And after that, it'll be $175. So please, you don't want to miss this event. It's going to be so inspiring, so encouraging, so equipping. You can register today at robskinner.com and look for the Climb Conference tab. That's robskinner.com/climb-conference. I look forward to seeing you in Dallas in December of 2021. Today on the program, I've got Dave Mitchell, who's a performance coach and is a disciple and leader in the kingdom of God, and someone that you have contacted me and said, hey, we want to hear from Dave Mitchell. I look forward to talking to Dave. Dave, welcome to the program.
Thanks, Rob. Appreciate it.
Yeah, it's interesting because a number of people, I'd asked people, who do you want to hear from? And your name came up. And so I even though we don't know each other prior to this, I tracked you down. You're kind enough to open up your schedule for this time. So I know there are a lot of people excited to hear from you today. Let me ask you this. How'd you become a Christian?
Let's see. I went to the University of Massachusetts back in 86. I got recruited there. Well, walked onto the football team / recruited. It's a controversial topic. But anyway, I went there. I ended up being a fullback. But believe it or not, in 86, I walked onto a team, UMass, with 3 disciples on the football team. Wow. So God, and then my last name is Mitchell. I sat next to Chip Mitchell, even though they weren't alphabetically organized, the lockers. But God put me right next to Chip, who had been a Christian about a year then. And he leads the Philly church now. But yeah, so God just put someone very much like Jesus right next to me. And I went crazy my freshman year, found a girl, thought we were going to get married. And then I was like, oh my gosh, like if we get married, we got to believe in God. We got to go to church together. And then that kind of started me studying the Bible. And then in October of 87, I became a Christian.
Okay. So did you study the Bible with Chip Mitchell or?
He studied with me.
He studied with you.
He was there first.
Okay.
Yeah. Kevin Smelly and Bo, just Bo. That's all. But those 3 became Christians the year before. So then I came in, and then in the offensive huddle we had 3 disciples for most of my time playing football at UMass. So
that's amazing.
We just had a great time. Yeah.
Now I got to ask, were you an easy study or were you a real hard head?
This relationship was serious. It was 6 months. I mean, it was like pulling Velcro apart really slow.
Wow.
And because my girlfriend studied the Bible for a while, for months and months and months, and came to conferences, and then she didn't make it. So it was, but it was tough. Plus, my dad had a business that I was kind of groomed to take over. And back at those, like I remember having breakfast with him and just being like, "Listen, Dad, if they ask me to go to Africa or something, I'm going to go."
Wow.
So don't hold the business, please. Those were those times. So yeah. So I don't know if I was an easy study. Doctrine was tough for me. The baptism thing, I just thought that was absolutely crazy that you had to be baptized to be saved. That, and between that and the girlfriend, I think those were the hardest things.
Now, how did you end up meeting your wife? You're in a relationship, obviously that didn't pan out. How'd you meet your current wife?
So a bunch of folks from Philly back at the end of 91 moved to New York City. And I had gone in the ministry in Philly in October. And then in November was asked, "Hey, do you want to go to New York and go and stay in the ministry and go to New York?" And so I decided to do that. And my wife, I was working campus ministry. Margie Norris at the time was working daytime ministry. And so it was kind of love at first conversation, I'll say.
Wow.
Not love at first sight, but probably love at first conversation. Met her in January. We were going steady in March. So it's pretty quick.
Wow.
And then got engaged in November and married. Yeah, it's been 28 years.
So you became a Christian in college and then went to New York to work in the ministry?
Yeah, well, I went to Philly to go in the ministry. But I had a job in New England. Matt Fridley, if you're watching this, thanks, Matt, asked me to play golf with him. He says, "Well, how about you move to Philadelphia?" I said, "I can't. I'm starting a job on Monday." He's like, "I know. Why don't you quit that job and move to Philly?" I'm like, because it was working with Chip Mitchell in sales. And he said, I'm like, and he's like, you can move to Philly and train to go in the ministry, not go in the ministry. So I moved to Philly. I quit first day of work. I quit my job. They had my business cards already. I'm like, "Look, I can't work here. I got to go to Philly, get a job there. I'm working there 3 months. Then I get asked to go in the ministry. I quit that job, go in the ministry in October. And then in November, they're like, "Do you want to move to New York City?" Wow. It was one of those crazy, great times, but I did have a feeling that God would bless that. And I met Margie just a month or two later and stayed there in New York for a couple of years, got married and moved to New Jersey.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Let me just, there's a little bit of, when you hit your desk, I'm hearing some rumbling going into your microphone. So every time you hit it, I hear a rumbling. So just, if you could just keep aware of that.
Absolutely.
It'll just be a little bit of background noise. I'll cut this part out, so don't worry about that. Okay. So you started out, you were going to go into business, you got a business degree, and then you started out in professional ministry. You're in the ministry in New York City. Okay. How did you get from there? Tell me a little bit about your career up until the time you got into coaching.
Yeah. So my wife and I went to Central Jersey. We led the church there, the campus ministry, Rutgers and Princeton, and eventually the church there. And then my wife just got to a point where she wanted to serve. She wanted to do everything, disciples do, but she just didn't want to kind of be supported from the church and was ready to kind of step out. That was 1998. So I was 30 years old and just had ministry experience. Maybe some of you out there can relate to this, but I was like, I didn't know what to do. I didn't know where to go. And, but I ended up getting into, I picked an industry. A friend of mine had some good advice. He said, "Look, just pick an industry, put your head down and go." And so I got into telecommunications at the time. I was 30 years old and then became, a rep and then a manager, then a vice president, and then a manager and then a rep again. So 16 years of doing that. And it was great. It was awesome. 6 of those years, I worked part-time in a region that didn't have a leader. So my wife and I actually were going to 2 different churches at the time. I was leading kind of one and she was going to another. And it was supposed to be for 1 year. It ended up being 6 years. But we did actually come together after 2 years as one big church. And I had the privilege of actually putting together small groups. We kind of did a small group movement. We had about 53 small groups there in New Jersey, and really, really good time, really good memories. I remember my son asking me once, I was coaching his football team too. And he said, Dad, do you have to go to that meeting tonight? And that's when I told Larry Craig, I'm like, okay, I'm done. I need to quit.
Wow.
I was just waiting for something to happen. And that was it. But yeah, so it was ministry. We kind of resigned at that time, and then, corporate job, and then working part-time in the ministry here in New Jersey.
So you were kind of self-supporting in your leadership while you worked your corporate job for 14 years.
Yeah, I was working my corporate job, and then, and then the church, I think there was some compensation, I think, actually, for that.
I see.
For the part-time position.
And so
I was doing their sermons. I was doing their midweeks. I was doing their D group. So it's
that's a lot.
Just about everything.
There you go. Okay. So then for those not familiar with the geography, Northern New Jersey, that's essentially New York City, the suburbs, right? Am I wrong on that one?
Yeah, right across the river. Mm-hmm.
Okay. So it's a lot of bedroom communities that commute into the city, I'm assuming.
Yeah.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
Now, why did you switch to coaching? I mean, you'd already experienced a couple careers. You've done ministry, and then you did ministry plus work, but now you're head on into coaching. Tell me about that.
Oh, such a good question. So unfortunately, my father, his life ended pretty quickly. He was in a plane midair collision.
Oh my gosh.
And so, got a call one day, and it's like, my sister was like, a plane went down. They think it was Dad's. And so, I remember going to work in corporate America after that. And it was just like, I went into work one day. I was like, what am I doing here? People had stopped going into the office for different reasons. A lot of the social part of it was gone. And I was like, do I just really want to take care of people's networks like that? Not that there's anything wrong with working professionally. I just felt very like, it's kind of one of those moments, when you're just like, man, my life could end really quick. And there were some things that I had been working on, Rob, that, I remember feeling like, just stuff. I didn't feel well. And what I mean by that is, I didn't feel like I was doing great spiritually. I didn't feel super alive inside. I felt like I was living my life, bumping along, but I was definitely hitting my ceiling. I definitely had some stuff. I remember seeing a therapist, and that helped a little bit. That helped release some things that had gone on and, growing up, and definitely believe in therapy. But I still didn't know what I had. I felt like, typical things like not feeling like I was good enough, not feeling like I had everything it took to be successful at a high level. And it was draining. And I was like, is this depression? Is this, so as far as getting into coaching, I think, part of it was for self first. Part of it was me on my journey to feel free from whatever this was. I mean, I was ready to do do I need to take, is it ADHD? Is it, like I said, is it depression? I really didn't know what it was. And so I had seen some examples of coaching, and that was pretty much, it was a dual effort for sure. I definitely wanted to get myself right and get some questions answered about me. And then I had a dream, like if I can figure this out, I'd love to turn around and give that back to people. Cause I, it's 20 something years of this kind of thinking and feeling stuck. So I was excited that if I could find the answers, to be able to turn around and see if other people felt the same way.
Okay. First of all, sorry about your dad. What year did that happen?
That was about 10 years ago.
Oh my gosh. I'm so sorry about that. That just must have been traumatizing.
Yeah.
From the outside, I look at you and I go, man, football player, star athlete. Obviously, you're great in high school, successful in the ministry, keeps on serving, fruitful and productive there, leading churches, then succeeding in the professional world. From outward appearances, it would just seem like you're killing it. You're doing great. Explain where, how. There must have been a gap there between what's going on the outside and what's happening on the inside.
Yeah. I remember, it's funny, when I was in high school, like I got voted most likely to succeed, and
Right.
I remember looking in the mirror and going like, you fooled them.
Mm.
I remember just being like, you pulled it off or whatever, just not being able to take that in, like, no, they got the right guy. I was like, oh my gosh, I fooled those people.
Mm-hmm.
And I think what I've learned, I mean, we'll probably get to this a little bit later, but I think what I've learned is when you're young, it's almost impossible to process emotionally from the maturity of your brain, the maturity of your character and your emotions when you're abused, verbally or especially by someone that you credit at a high level. The weight of the weight of those accusations. Maybe you were bullied, maybe you were verbally abused, physically abused, left out, all these types of things, not included, disclusion, right? What I've learned is you just can't process that as a child. You just accept it, especially if the source is credible. Mm. And in my situation, the source was beyond credible. And so what happens is you learn to compensate for the inadequacy, right? So I became extremely over competitive. I mean, one-on-one in basketball, 2-on-2 ping pong. But that was such a call for help. I was so empty. I just needed that win. I mean, at the YMCA or at the park, that was important to me. That I had a leak. And again, we'll get into what that leak was, and it is now fixed. But I just had a leak, and even understanding God's grace, and even understanding that I wasn't living a double life. It just that's the thing. Where's the leak? Why do I feel this way? Why do I have to win? And it was a treadmill life. Mm-hmm. I mean, I got to win in the ministry. I needed like a D group. I need to show up. I want to have the most baptisms. I want to have the most visitors.
Sure.
And if I don't, I hope they don't ask questions on it.
Right.
And, when you're playing football and they're watching the films and you have a bad play, you're like, keep going. Mm-hmm. I don't think I can take it. Having a bad play and getting called out on it and things like that. So,
okay. So can you explain how coaching works? Because the thought comes to my mind, is it like discipling? Is it, almost I would wonder, okay, if you were looking for that type of job, certainly ministry has an element of counseling to it. Can you just give a little background on like what is coaching and why did you choose that path?
Sure. So I went into training. I went into coaching training, and I didn't really know. I had the same question. What is this, right? And everything. And so what I learned the difference between therapy and coaching, right? So let's just start at a high level. So therapy is typically, again, it's just typically where you go to therapy for someone who's not functioning to functioning. So, right, that meets that need to get you back up functioning. And then I've heard it said that coaching is from functional to optimal. Okay. So when you're functioning, things are going well, but you really want to do better. You want to make your ceiling, your floor, and go to a whole nother level. That's what they've explained coaching. Consulting is when you're the expert and you're called in to consult a situation, right? You're called in to be the professional, to have the experience, to make the changes based on what works. That's consulting, not mm-hmm. coaching. Mm-hmm. So for coaching to work properly, we have to have the answers to, pretty much, the following questions, which is just who's the expert? That's the first thing. Like, let's say you and I are coaching, right? And you're the client and I'm the coach. It's like, which one of us is going to be the expert, right? Like, and one of the beautiful things about coaching is that now this is under ICF, so there's lots of coaching programs out there. I mean,
sure.
there's you can get coaching degree in 20 minutes. Some
Right.
The one that I chose, I did a lot of research, but it was ICF, International Coaching Federation, 90 hours of in classroom training. And one of the things that really got me into it was that you really believe that your client is the expert of their own life.
Mm-hmm.
I thought about Jesus and just the empowering questions that he asked, in hindsight, kind of looking at their model and seeing how much coaching works. And then I look at Jesus and, just the times where he'd be like, so what do you want me to do for you?
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know if you ever noticed, but like, he's blind. I wonder if the disciples were like, hello, but he would ask, wouldn't he? He'd be like, what do you want me to do for you? And then, what about Peter when he was like, do you love me? Right. And Peter's like, yeah. And then, do you love me? He's like, yeah. He's like, do you love me? It's like, think about the layers. Like, yeah, sure. Yeah, I think so. And then it's like, whoa, like he could have taught him lots of things. He could have, but he asked questions. So the coaching is being super curious about someone else. I don't know if you and your wife would you consider yourself opposites, Rob, or would you consider, or someone in if someone in your family may be completely opposite than you?
Yes, definitely.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So imagine me trying to come in as the consulting both of you on a vacation,
mm-hmm.
or consulting both of you on what you want to do with that hour of free time. But I'm going to come in and tell you, okay, you need to go jogging and you need to go rollerblading, right? Maybe I'll hit it, maybe I'll miss, right? So coaching is where you put yourself on the shelf, and your skill is the ability to empower others through provocative questions.
Okay. So how would a person know that they even need coaching? What you said is that therapy is when you're non-functioning, you try to get functional. I know that's a kind of a broad generalization. And then coaching is when you're already functioning, you're going to a higher level. But most of us are going along with our lives. We keep a roof over our heads. We keep fed and try to exercise if we can and go to church, regularly. And we've gotten used to it. It's like a fish in water. It's like have not experienced anything different. What would be like the warning signs or a red flag? Like, I could really benefit from coaching. That's kind of what I wonder. Like, you don't know what you don't know. So how would you know that, hey, coaching could really help me?
Right. That's such a good question. I think the answer to that is like, when you have that nagging desire, like when you watch a movie that's an inspiring movie for you. Everybody's got different movies. Again, that's the beauty of humankind, right? We're all different parts of the body. Mm-hmm. We're all different. You've got people who want to be chefs, right? You have people who want to be athletes. You got people who want to be salespeople. I mean, we're just awesome. We're different. But in our differences and in our lives, at certain times, we can feel caged, right? We can feel caged. We can feel like, man, I think I'm thinking too much about what people think about me here. I think I can't get that thought out of my head that I'm just not good enough, right? Mm-hmm. Or just that I can take on that next level, or and I think it's a matter of, would you benefit from understanding this? Number one is, what does it look like? And typically you have to even use the words with a magic wand, because so much time we're so in our heads, right? We can't see past like the hedges because we're so in our heads. So it's like, okay, magic wand, here we go. That's the Disney here. Magic wand, just to get over the hedge of our own issues, right? Tell me what it looks like when it's done. Right. Now, and that can be a month, a year, 5 years, or just legacy, right? Like what's going on for you when it's all going right? Right. I'm guessing there's some single folks here, right? And maybe their dream is a relationship. Maybe there's some married folks, right? That they want to be better parents, or they want their career to skyrocket, or maybe, maybe just from a spiritual standpoint, right? Like I want to multiply who I am. I want to write some books. I want to make an impact in the world. And just letting someone and really listening to someone talk about that, right? Because where do you talk about that? You don't typically talk about that at the diner, right? Or you don't typically talk about that at work, like what that ultimate end game is for you. So I think the coaching provides a certain atmosphere for dreaming,
right?
And for really talking about potential. And then from there, it's like, okay, I totally get what you want. Right. Awesome. What's standing in the way?
Right.
And where are you now? And then the ability to trust someone who's like legally like in there with you is, I will not tell anybody what you say.
Right.
I mean, again, even friends, right? Like, you probably, Rob, you probably tell some friends this and some friends that, right. But when something really comes up, you go through your Rolodex, right? You go through your contact list. You're like, who can I really tell this to?
Right.
So I'm sworn to I'm confidential as a coach, right? So people can blah.
Right.
They can feel safe and they can have that room and that space. Sometimes, I mean, there's a joke, but sometimes it's like 85%, of just sometimes doing better is just having someone really listen to you.
Right.
Totally and not judge you and not try to fix you, but just to really find that space. So it's where's that magical place you want to be, right? Where are you now? And then what's standing in the way? And Rob, I'll tell you, this is why I still get coached. I believe in coaching. I pay for coaching, is because there's typically 4 things that are going to stand in someone's way. And you can tell me if this resonates at all for you, but or your audience, but like, number 1, limiting beliefs.
Right.
Like just that limiting belief, too tall, too short, right? Too late, too old, too skinny, missed my opportunity. And, that one can just really drain the energy. Imagine just having a gas tank, and that this vehicle is going to take you to your dreams, and limiting beliefs is a hole in that gas tank. It's going to drain the gas. It's going to drain your power,
right? Because
you've just got something stuck in there about yourself that's going to limit you from even what we know about faith, right? Being sure of what you hope for and certain of what you don't see. Secondly, is interpretations. So it's a lot of times we interpret what people feel towards us by how they look at us,
right,
and what they say, and we make up stories like, that person doesn't like me in the cafeteria, and this person on my job, I know they hate me. Have they said they hated you? No, but I know they do. Why? I can just tell. And we can make up these stories in our heads, and that is another hole in the gas tank, right? So that's going to drain, because I'm interpreting the world, right? I'm making up these stories, but they're not faithful stories, right? So interpretations, assumptions. Why, you asked me, why would someone need a coach? Because they're assuming that the past is going to repeat itself. It's like, how you doing? I'm hanging in there. Same as yesterday. There's not that vibrancy, right? There's not that hope. There's not that dream. There's not that. And I'm not saying every once in a while we can just be like, hey, what's up? But like, for a lot of people, they are just hanging in there. And because there's not that hope that today is going to be much different than yesterday. I loved your tagline for your podcast, right? With no regrets, right? And then what else?
Make this life count.
Make this life count. It's when these 3 things are going on, they're like rocks in your backpack. You can do it, but when you're carrying limiting beliefs and you're carrying wrong interpretations, and you're assuming that tomorrow is going to be just like today and yesterday, it's heavy and it's hard. And you could be doing so much better if you could just wash those things out.
Right.
And the thing, Rob, is that as a coach, what I get to do is I get to be objective in my client's mind, because they're very subjective in their own mind, and that's a lot of fun.
That's great.
Because when I see something, I call it out. Right. But for them, it's always been there.
Right. Exactly. That's the tricky part.
Yeah, yeah, because our hearts are deceitful above all things. And so when someone else is there, they get to gently call it out. Can I mention just one more thing
Well,
of why someone?
you mentioned four things that hold us back. I've got limiting beliefs, interpretations, assumptions. Was there a fourth one?
Yeah, last one. Yeah. So I'm going to call this one the gremlin. And this is what when I heard people talking about this, I remember I went to a diner once and there were these guys and they were talking about like having stuck thoughts in your head. And I remember like leaning over, like, please say what that's called. Honestly. So they were talking about the gremlin. They were talking about this inner critic voice. Now we know from the Bible that we have an accuser. We know from the Bible that he accuses us day and night, right? And so I believe that part of it is this inner critic. I do believe it's a spiritual accusation, reminding us of all our failures and all the bad things we've ever done. And I remember I was talking to this one sister once, and she's a women's ministry leader. She's kind of a household name in our church, and I don't want to say who it was for her privacy. And we were talking for about 3 minutes, and she was just sharing some stuff, and she was nervous about this event coming up and speaking and stuff. And then she said something else. And I said, let me ask you a question. I said, and I'd never asked someone this question before, but I was just listening to her. I said, if you could surgically remove any thought that you could from your mind, what would it be?
Oh, good question.
And she just bawls, right? Wow. And I'm like, oh my gosh, we're at this meeting. Her husband comes over, like, what did you do to my wife? What did you do to my wife? I'm like, I didn't do anything. I just asked her a question. And, guess which one it was? That I'm not good enough.
I see.
I'm not good enough. And so we did a few sessions on this gremlin, that had really hoisted down in this person's mind. And we actually worked through and did gremlin ejection, or I don't really usually call it that, but I'm just thinking in my head. I mean, we eradicated this thought, is it going to come back tempting? Sure. But we were able to do some really good work, and that no longer holds that person back and no longer holds me back. But there's, it just takes some work to get those out.
Yeah. But
life is so different once they're gone. So those are the 4 things why someone would work with a coach. Again, it's not an exclusive list,
right?
But it's the hurdles that most of us don't get over by ourselves because we're subjective to them even happening in our lives.
Right. Really powerful stuff. And I think, one of the reasons why I wanted to start this podcast is try to help other small church leaders, because one of the challenges that a small church or small ministry leader faces is they're typically all by themselves. They're maybe in a remote area, and they form probably 80% of our family of churches is smaller church leaders. Typically, they're the most mature, quote unquote, in their sphere of influence, and so they don't have anyone to talk to. And right now is one of the most challenging times I've ever experienced in the ministry. I mean, it's tough, and it's tough mentally because there's no precedent. There's no like, hey, this used to be like back in, 93. No, it's not like that at all. It's completely new ground. And I think we're all reaching out going, okay, how can we manage this? And I think those gremlins are going after people. I've certainly seen it in my own life, and I go, if I'm feeling it, I'm sure other people are feeling it too. Any words of encouragement to those who are facing that kind of a situation?
Oh, I do. I'm trying to see. So, a couple things. I love working with church leaders. I did it for 12 years, but that doesn't make me any better of a coach. If anything, it puts me in danger of wanting to become a consultant. But if you're watching this and you lead a church, I totally feel for you. I totally get it. I was coaching this one brother who leads, I guess he'd be considered a small church guy. And we were coaching, and I was like, how's it going? He's like, I'm like, what? What's going on? What's going on? And he's like, I don't know what it is. He goes, he goes, I get done speaking, and then I come home and I'm in a bad mood and I'm tired. I just want to take a nap. And he goes, I don't know what it is. He goes, I'm not feeling like after I speak, yes, it really helped people. And I was like, okay. I was like, walk me through what you do. Walk me through how you prepare. So to make a long conversation short, I was like, do you pray about your message? Yeah, I pray about it. Well, tell me what that prayer is like, and he's kind of walking me through his prayer. And I said, okay, how much are you trusting that prayer? Like, where are you as far as that prayer and then what happens afterwards? And there you go. And he's like, bing, in our world, it's aha moments, right? It's like, it's having an insight, right?
Right.
So coaching is about insight.
Right.
So for me, I'm going through, do you love me? Do you love me? Like I'm saying, so let's talk about your sermon. So what happened was I didn't have the bing, I didn't have the aha moment. He did.
Right.
Because what he realized, he wasn't trusting his prayer. What he was trusting was people's response to him.
Oh, good.
How many thank yous? How many people came up to him? Did they not come up to him? He had just misguided his evaluation point. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I had no idea. He had no idea this was going to come up in the call.
Right.
We just got on the topic of how he felt after he preached. And here's the thing. Since then, he's like, oh my gosh. He goes, it's changed my life. He goes, it's completely different. He says, I've had this person in the front row. I've had that person. Okay, household names in our kingdom. And he goes, and I could care less what they think, in a good way.
Right.
Because he's feeling spirit-led. He's feeling like this is the spirit, and I said what I said, and God's going to do the magic. The word doesn't come back empty. And he's had tons of energy, after his messages. This was going on for 20 years.
Wow. With
this person. So what I'd love to say to small church leaders is, man, first of all, I'd love to have a conversation with you, and I hear you, and I'm with you, and I'm not going to fix you.
Mm-hmm. For those who are skeptical, I'm sure some people are going, Dave's just a guy. And tell me some stories you've shared a couple. You shared about a woman who was really impacted by coaching. This minister whose preaching is impacted. Can you share with me a story where you felt like coaching really made a difference? That for you go, okay, this is why I got into coaching in the first place.
Yeah. So I was working with this one client. This person runs 2 businesses, incredibly successful, but was having some issues personally, with his own health and with some other things. And there were some other things that were holding him back in this one part of one of his businesses. So we started a coaching call, and I'm like, hey, how's it going? And he said, not so good. How's it go? What's going on? He's like, I didn't go to the gym this morning. Okay. What happened? I didn't set my alarm, and I just didn't really want to go. I said, okay, so what do you think it was that made you didn't want to go? And he said, basically what he said was, my father didn't love me growing up.
That's a big jump.
That's a big jump, right? So this is a Christian. This is a business owner. This is someone who's been a Christian 20 plus years.
Right.
So if I was discipling, right, or if I was just a friend, I'd be like, dude, you're crazy. What are you talking about?
Right.
What about your dad? Dude, right? Like, come on, stop it.
Right.
Get up in the gym and be a man, right?
Mm-hmm.
But I was like, okay. See, because if we just stop the story here, I want to say this is what you have to understand. This is what I understand as a coach. Sometimes it's a slight adjustment that keeps people from going from 0 to hero or 50 to it's not usually this huge trauma. It's ways of thinking that got stuck because when it happened to you or when you had issues, you just weren't mature enough to process what happened. And so it has stuck with you through the years. So again, I had to bite my tongue because when he said that, I was like, wow, okay. So I said to him, okay, so you're saying that if you would have had a better relationship with your father, that you would have gone to the gym this morning. And he goes, yeah. I said, okay. I said, fine. I said, is this true? Like with all things, like people with better dads do better in life? And he said, yeah. I said, okay. So I said, you like to read, right? Mm-hmm. I said, oh yeah, I said, I'll believe you. And what I want you to do is I want you to go research your 5 favorite authors. And if all of them had great relationships with their dads, then I'll believe what you're saying. But let's just see what happens. So he goes back and he gets on the phone call. I'm getting goosebumps. He's like, oh my gosh. He's like, this guy's dad never talked to him. This guy's dad beat him. He was like, he's like, oh my gosh. He's like, he's like, I get it. It's not my dad. It's not him that's holding me back. You know, the conniving and the cutting down and all that stuff. And one of the things that happened was he didn't renew with me. And he's like, you did too good a job the first time. He's like, and since then, I can't mention, he's gone on to win awards with his craft.
Wow.
He has skyrocketed. And he just had, let's go through our list, right? Was it a limiting belief? Kind of, right? But it was the limiting belief is if you have a bad dad, you can't be that motivated and that successful. Like there's going to be a ceiling to how healthy you can be and, how well you can do professionally. It was like a ball and chain around him. But once these other guys, once he realized that they did awesome and soared without great fatherly relationships, he could then get rid of that limiting belief, right? And have a transforming truth, and that's what he needed. And that was his insight. That was his aha. And he has never turned back. He's killing it.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
Now, in our previous discussion, you mentioned the 3 E's. Now, can you cover that again? I thought that was pretty interesting when we talked about it in our pre-interview.
Sure. So if you've ever slept over someone's house and, maybe you needed to go to the bathroom and you didn't know where the light switch was and you're walking through the living room, pretty good chance you're going to fall into something, right? you kind of have that closed eyes, your hands are out in front of you. So the first thing in coaching that I work with people on is enlightenment. Like, let's turn the lights on in your mind. Let's talk about what's really going on there, because if we don't start calling things the right things and we don't start naming stuff, if we don't start attaching, how are you ever going to really grow and get by and get through those hurdles that we discussed earlier, right?
Right.
Oh, okay, that's a limiting belief. And that's an assumption. Oh, that's an interpretation. Oh, that's my gremlin kicking in. That's full-time light, right? Like you're now cognizant of what's happening in your life. You can name things.
Right.
I think you and I talked, Rob, about how I didn't know the difference between a fixed mindset and a growth mindset.
Right.
And Carol Dweck's work, which is so amazing. And when I read her book, Mindset, and realized that I had a fixed mindset instead of a growth mindset, talk about, it was a fireworks of aha moments. Wow. And just like, there you go. That when I talked about being competitive before, a fixed mindset person thrives on victory and championing and holding on to your trophy, because you're so scared that if you leave the victory dance, that you're going to be no good again.
Right.
So you don't leave it. You brag and you boast and you want to become this idol, right? A growth mindset says, hey, that was great. 24 hours later, let's go and do the next thing.
Right.
So what enlightenment is just what's going on with me? What's it called? Right. And okay, I totally get it. Right. Or not totally, maybe, but I get it.
Right.
Then we move on to engagement. Okay, Rob. So now, Jesus, sounds like you've had some real good enlightenment. Sounds like it's making sense to you. And we've got this and that call. So how do you want to show up on your podcast now? Now that you know this is going on, let's talk about how you want to be with your family, how you want to be at your podcast, right? Like, who do you really want who are your dream clients, right? All those things we can now talk about, taking what you learned from enlightenment and engaging in your life differently. Going after that big dream that you have, taking the motorcycle ride across the country, raise awareness for small churches. All right. For some of my clients, they're as successful as you can be. They got lots of letters after their names, but guess what? It's their marriage. Guess what? It's their relationship with their kids. Guess what? They cannot get a hold of their health. They've got the resources to do it, right? Like, in other words, we all can engage at a higher level,
right?
But usually not without turning some lights on first, and really getting clear about like what's happening. And then now I'm engaging differently. What that leads to is the last D that we talked about, which is empowerment, right? So now not only do I get what's going on, that's important, but I'm living differently. And guess what? I'm empowered now, right? I'm living an empowered life, and I can go and turn that empowerment onto others,
right?
Which is so powerful, right? Even as we study the Bible with people, even as we love the lost, as we love the poor, right? We are no longer rocks in the backpack, Dave Mitchell, because I've got those things. Again, they're close by. They don't ever go away to heaven,
right?
But they're out of my backpack. I'm living light. I'm getting more done, and I'm not making it about myself, right? So I'm having that impact. I'm having that empowered life.
So Dave, you're also an Ironman athlete. How'd you get into that?
Kicking and screaming. Oh gosh. I mean, it kind of started off with like, while I was playing football, you get strong, you get weak,
right.
You live for 3 months, you take 2 off, you start over again. And
right.
My wife didn't care if I was in shape or not. She never noticed. I'm like, one day I was just like in the gym, like, what am I doing this for?
Right.
And then, I'd heard about the sport triathlon yeah, it's, what it is? It's, someone said this once, and I really agree. Like when you go to just a running race, like, the runners are running and they're doing their personalized stretches and they have the perfect sneaker. And if you go to a biking race, similar, if you go to a swim race, like everyone's zoned in and kind of in their world.
Right.
When you go to a triathlon, we all think at least one thing.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like, there's this humility that kind of just, like, the people are cool. It's more relaxed. I don't know. I like the atmosphere. It's been a lot of fun. And you can start off real small, like a sprint, a 400-meter swim with a 12-mile or 15-mile bike ride with a 5K. And then it goes all the way up to the full distance of like the swim's 2.5 miles, 112 bike with a full marathon.
Wow.
So it's, and then you can pick in between there.
Yeah.
But it's a fun sport. It humbles you.
Yeah.
I crashed Friday.
Oh boy.
Got that. My arm's a mess. But so it humbles you, but you get these great times with guys, either friends, neighbors, or brothers, and we go out and we just have a blast. It's really fun.
I really think there's part of a man, at least for me, that is attracted to really testing yourself, and there's some satisfaction, even though doing it itself, some things I do, I go, that it's no fun at times, just miserable. Right. But then looking back, you go, that was awesome. I think about crossing the country on a motorcycle. I mean, 4,400 miles. There are times I go, this really stinks. But looking back, I go, it was awesome. But I like to push the limits. I mean, I like TV shows like Alone, where they drop people out and they've got to survive, and see how long they can live. But I think there's something innate in a man that, and perhaps women too, you just go, okay, there's something attractive about being able to push your limits physically. Don't you think?
Yeah. And it's the people that you meet too at these events. So Ironman's tagline is anything is possible. And, I was in line. I was down in Florida last year. The guy behind me, I'm like, hey man, what's going on? We start talking. He was a Major League Baseball player who got hurt and got hooked on opioids.
Opioids.
for like 10 years. And he was like, I'm going to quit these drugs and I'm going to do an Ironman. So for a lot of people at these races, they just lost 70 pounds. They just lost 100 pounds. They just got off drugs. Recently there was this was in Florida last November. We're there. I'm like, I see this booth. I'm like, what's going on here? And here it is. It's this guy named Chris, and he's going to do the Ironman, it was just amazing to, it's just, you just meet so many different people there. It's just different stories. It's so inspiring.
Right.
It's an inspiring environment.
Right. Now, you mentioned an event that impacted you last November. Can you explain that? Yeah.
So last year I went down to Florida, and there was a booth for this Down syndrome athlete that was signed up to do the Ironman. And, like when people hear of an Ironman, they take someone who's just fully healthy, a fully healthy athlete. And then they still say, whoa, Chris with Down syndrome can't bend one of his arms. Chris with Down syndrome, he didn't even start eating like hardened food until he was like 4. Like Chris with Down syndrome had like 6 brain surgery. Like it goes on and on and on. And when Chris rides his bike, he can't take a drink and ride at the same time. He's got to pull over. When Chris swims, every stroke, his whole body comes up out of the water. And you're just thinking, that's why no one had ever signed up with Down syndrome before for an Ironman, because someone who's you get what I'm saying? Someone who's totally healthy, it's like, whoa. For him, it's like, no. Instead of whoa, it's no. So he had this motto called 1% better. And I put the tattoos on my arms for my race. I love it. And he's like, if I just get 1% better every day, I'll be able to do this Ironman race. Wow. And there was a couple of times I passed him out there, and he fell on his bike. He had some really tough things, but you get 17 hours to finish the Ironman. And the winners finish it in about 8. Okay. Chris finished with like 14 minutes left at like 16:48 or something like that.
Wow.
And became the first Down syndrome to not only register, but to finish the Ironman. So, I mean, you got to Google Chris Nikic. If you put Ironman, Chris Nikic, just Chris N Ironman, it'll come right up. But I mean, just shed tears. It's just an amazing story about what's possible. And talk about someone who's living in the moment. Talk about someone who's just focusing on getting a little bit better each day. Mm-hmm. Just that motto, 1% better. And it led me from a coach into a whole new certification called Tiny Habits. And Tiny Habits from a PhD professor in Stanford, he's a behavioral scientist, BJ Fogg. I'm telling you, I believe I have a bad case of ADHD, but they just didn't, back in the 70s and 80s, they just didn't diagnose that. And so I have a tough time with, like squirrels, right? Squirrels everywhere.
Right.
I'm going to write a book one day called Cage the Squirrel, because
great title.
I'm constantly trying to figure out how to cage my squirrels. But these tiny habits are so simple. Like after I sit down in my chair, I will open MailChimp, mm-hmm. to write a blog. And then you're done. You celebrate. Like you just celebrate the actual step, or I'll write one sentence. And mm-hmm. it's kind of what Chris did with the Ironman. Like one day I'm going to swim half a lap. The next day I'm going to swim 3/4 of a lap. And all of a sudden years go by and he's swimming 2.5 miles, and then it's like, I'm going to learn to ride a bike, and then, and just little by little, I'm going to run 1 mile. I'm going to run 1.1 miles. All of a sudden he's running a marathon after riding a bike for 112 miles. So it really encouraged me a lot and helped me, because I feel like a lot of the coaching courses out there, you need a lot of motivation to change. So imagine like needing to be this high to start a coaching program. Tiny Habits are the step stool to get to that where the other one starts.
Right.
It's just these tiny principles, and you can just Google tinyhabits.com or BJ Huff. You can get the book if you want, but it's just these little things you can do that get you to the beginning of other programs, and then you can really set sail and really see some great change in your life. So yeah, it was really great meeting Chris, and I'll never forget it.
That's amazing. Dave, what's the most common issue that you face with your coaching clients? You may have covered it already, but what's the most, where you go, okay, I've seen that before?
Yeah, great question. I was thinking about that. I don't know if I can narrow it down to one, but I'll tell you a really big one is, the scripture that says, take every thought captive and make it obedient to Christ. As men, I'm not sure, I didn't say it in too many sisters classes, but as men, that topic, when we talk about that, is usually what topic? When we talk about
purity,
taking every thought.
Of course, purity. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And it's worked.
Right.
It works.
Yep.
You take a thought captive and you say, I'm not going to take a second look. And not that way. Go the other way.
Yep.
And we've done really well at it, but I'm not sure I've heard a sermon on how to do that about our mental health. I'm not sure I've heard a sermon about how to, like, when you call yourself a dummy, or you're stupid, or there you go again, or like what about that thought? What if you were to take those thoughts captive, right? But what happens is, I don't know what you guys have in your state, but we have something called Easy Pass. I think it goes it's all along the Northeast, and it's an Easy Pass. And if you have an Easy Pass, you can drive your car right through the toll zone. Now you don't even have to hit your brakes. They've got express lane. And so what happens, I think, sometimes is we'll go through the traffic, to not lust, but like self-harm thoughts or self-deprecating thoughts, we'll go right through that Easy Pass express lane, and we don't even realize it. And so what happens is, we're like a 1-gear bike, Rob. We've got like 1 gear, and we just stay in that gear. And that day, if it's a real, like if good things happen that day, then maybe it's a good gear, and I'm just going to cruise through feeling good. But should you get a flat tire, right? Or circumstances don't go maybe the way you wanted them to. What I see with a lot of clients is they're not really aware of how to shift.
Right.
You mentioned one of my programs called The Joyful Life. So really the goal of the program, it's a 12-week program, is that by the end, they'll be able to look at James 1 verse 2. Consider it pure joy whenever you go through trials of any kind, because that the testing of your the scripture, right? So the goal is that by the end of those 4 months, you'll be able to really look at that scripture and go, you know what? I know how to do that. I'm not, I'm not perfect. It doesn't mean it's wrong to mourn. It doesn't mean it's wrong to be sad when you're compassionate. We know Jesus was, but because James 1:2 has no time length on it. It doesn't say immediately, but it says eventually. Consider it pure joy. So I help my clients to be able to put everything into that basket and give them the tools so that they are actually different from an attitudinal standpoint. They're able to take that scripture and say, you know what? It definitely works for purity, but it also works when I'm feeling bad about myself. It also works in hard times. It also works when I don't want to forgive, and so on and so on. And so really stretching that out like an accordion, that scripture, and letting it be more of an anthem of my life and my clients' lives versus just, oh yeah, that's really good for lust.
That's powerful. I want to go back to a question I asked earlier, and I just was wondering, coaching versus discipling. I think many listeners were familiar with the concept of discipling. Sometimes it's been good, sometimes it's been not the greatest. But if you could explain, like, what's the difference?
Sure. I got to tell you, this is like, and again, I want to be very careful. I want to say one thing. Discipling has been great in my life at certain points. I've been a Christian for 34 years. I'm so grateful for discipling. So please don't, really, it's just certain times in my life, young Christian and even older, it's been amazing.
Right.
But what I've learned and what I'm really excited about is when my wife and I get with couples now, my wife's certified coach as well. She's not practicing, but she did get certified. When we get with couples, in about 50% of the time, we get about 600% more done in a time together with a couple, because what we used to do is guess. What we used to do in discipling under the umbrella of discipling was guess. Of course, we pray. Like the pressure was on us to do the work. Like, what do we think they need to change? Or what's something we could work on this week? Or what can we share? And then we're kind of going through our concordance or Googling and getting ready for the D time. And then it went something like this. Hey, how's it going? Good. How you doing? How about that football game? Yeah. Hey, my wife and I, Marge and I were thinking, have you guys thought about this? Or have you noticed lately, like your child just runs all over the church, whatever it was.
Right.
Hey, I noticed you guys were fighting the other day. Or, hey, I know you emailed me that you guys got in a fight. What happened? Right. And then you listen to what happened and you go, and then you're thinking of a scripture and then you try to relate. So discipling is a lot of empathy, and bear with me on this. What I've realized is that you can go too far with empathy if you do it before listening, and it's almost completely ineffective because you can take over. And what happens internally is in your mind, as soon as someone starts, oh yeah, my dog died. Then you said, did my dog die? Oh yeah, I had a dog die. Oh, I'm so sorry. I had a dog die too. For years, Rob, I thought that was the best way to disciple. Empathize immediately and get in there. And I've learned that's not, and again, I'm not spreading like everyone else is like me, but so then you're like, you empathize, you share a scripture, we'll be really praying for you. That was kind of real high level how discipling times were going. Hoping to move it forward a little bit. Okay, scrap. So now what's different? What's like a coaching time together? What's that like? So instead of having all the answers, it's having some questions. Under discipling, I felt like I always had to have the answers. I got to have the scripture. I got to know best. I got to give advice. So coaching is like, so we get together, same thing, same couple, same situation. And hey guys, before we start, I know you got in a fight earlier and you wanted to talk about that. Let me ask you a question. It's 6:30 right now. Let's say it's 8 o'clock, because I know you guys have to leave at 8 o'clock. What would you love to see happen by 8 o'clock? Oh, well, I'd love to see him get it. Wow. I'd love to see him get the hammer because he's not treating me right. Okay, so you want to see him get the hammer. Okay. And what about you? What are you hoping for, husband? I just want peace in the house. I can't take it. We're so glad you guys could see us tonight. Okay. So you want peace in the house and you want him to get the hammer. Okay. So let's start with the husband. So what does peace in the house look like? Peace in the house looks like she comes and gives me a kiss when I go out through the door. Like, okay. And I'm taking notes, right? He's the expert, not me. I'm the one with the questions, not the answers. I'm like taking notes. Okay. So then it's like, okay, so how do you feel about what he just said about you giving him a kiss when you walk into? I ain't kissing that guy. I ain't kissing that guy and stuff like that. But here's the thing. So what would it take for you to kiss him? What would have to happen where you feel like he's kissable? Oh, now, right? Do you love me? Do you love me? Do you love me? Unpack it a little bit.
Yeah.
Now, again, I don't want to intimidate anybody. This is 6 years of coaching training.
Sure, of course.
This is a skill. This isn't just, but you asked me, and that's the difference is that, see how we didn't get to like all the things that happened? What you do with coaching is you start from where you want to end and you work backwards. Discipling is typically, discipling has had many colors. It's been a great experience for many people. But sometimes when it's not a great experience is when people feel fixed and they don't feel listened to and they don't feel like you get them.
I find that interesting because 95% of my appointments with people, the most important stuff that we talk about happens right before people leave, like in the last 5 minutes of the conversation. I mean, all of a sudden you start getting down to what really matters. Prior to that, it's all just warm up, fluff, just talking.
He said, she said.
Exactly. And right when you get down to the most important stuff, it's time to go. Everyone's tired and it oftentimes doesn't end up anywhere.
Right. It's always their agenda, right? Now, again, when there's young Christians, there is training, there is time for advice, there is time for consulting. Please help. Let's talk about people who are Christians like 10, 15, 20 years, okay? Because that's a lot of our church now, right? We're older as well. So, but like, I'll give you an example. So I was out with someone who is an intern in the ministry out here, where I am, and we got into a conversation, and he's like, yeah, I call my discipler, and then I get advice about this situation, and then he tells me what to do, and then I do it. He goes, but I don't feel like I ever learned for myself. And I said, what if when you called the discipler, I said, so what do you want the discipler to say to you? And he's like, what do you think? I said, great. Why do you want him to say that? And he's like, well, if you asked me what I thought, then I'd have to think. We so want to help people. Our ego wants to be the person that said that right thing or did that right thing. So a lot of coaching is getting rid of the ego and bringing in curiosity and really knowing that you don't know the best. They know they've got the Holy Spirit in them. They know they either are blocked or they're not thinking about it. So in this conversation, when you call to get advice, when someone calls you to get advice, not to be mean or, hey, let me ask you a question. I've got tons to say about this. What do you think? Let's say they say, I have no idea what I think. You say, okay, well, let me ask you a question. What helps you to know? Or what have you done in the past to figure things out? Well, I pray or I fast and then I look through scriptures. Okay, so is this urgent? No. Okay. So what if you were to take that same approach to this and then call me back in 2 days? Great. Awesome.
Wow.
So it's like, this is going to sound intense, but what I've realized is that one of the biggest insults I can give to someone is to give them the answer. It's an insult to their connection with God, the Holy Spirit, their relationship, and I'll probably be wrong. But if I can turn it around and just think through, like, what is it you want? Where are you now? What's standing in your way? Right. And, how can I be of service in those ways? Right. That's the difference between discipling and coaching.
Right. How would people, I know there's people listening, you go, okay, this sounds really interesting. I could really use some help. I don't even know what it is, but how would they get a hold of you?
Yeah, good question. So the website that they could reach out to me on is davemitchellcoaching.com. So just DAVEMITCHELL coaching.com. And then right on there, right at the top, you can reach out. A lot of times people just we have a conversation. They fill out a strategy session questionnaire. And sometimes even just that one conversation has meaning for them. It might not be time for coaching for them for many reasons, too much school, too much work. Maybe the finances aren't there, but even just that one conversation has been helpful for some folks, just to reach out and talk. And then every Wednesday I put out a newsletter or blog, whatever you want to call it, so they can sign up to get on my list right there on the website, so that every week I talk about stuff like this.
That's awesome. That's fantastic. What advice would you give to a person who wants to make this life count?
Start with today. Get 1% better today.
Dave, thanks so much for joining me on the program. It's great to have you.
Awesome, Rob. Thanks so much for having me.
Thank you so much for joining the Rob Skinner podcast. If you're enjoying this podcast, please hit the subscribe button and let your friends know about it and how to find it. Because my goal is to inspire you to make this life count, live a no regrets life, and multiply disciples, leaders, and churches. Have a great day and make this life count.